Hello to all participants of this webinar and welcome in today's session. I hope you all having a good day. I am Erita Recepi, the organizer of this PCB webinar. Today's webinar will discuss the topic of CSR versus regulatory penalties, a critical organizational choice and loss prevention strategies. In this webinar, the presenter will discuss differences and similarities between CSR implementation and regulatory penalties, strategies for effective CSR implementation, beneficial consequences of CSR implementation. The presenter of this topic is Mr. Ayo Ogunkoya, Principal HSE and Risk Management Consultant and Generative HSE Inc. At the end of the webinar, we have question and answer session in where all your questions will be answered by the presenter. Accordingly, I would kindly ask you to write down any question you may have during this webinar in the chat box of your control panel. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy this webinar. Mr. Ayo, you may start the presentation.
Thank you everyone for joining this presentation. And thank you, Erita, for the introduction. Today we will be reviewing a couple of areas of CSR as it relates to regulatory penalties. Our overview today would be CSR versus regulatory penalties. For CSR scenario, in that case we will be reviewing the BP Gulf of Mexico incident, strategies for effective CSR implementation and beneficial consequences of CSR implementation. So these are the core areas that we will be going through today at this on this presentation. We might be wondering what CSR. The best way I could put this in words, I said corporate social responsibility, which is CSR, is an internally structured framework or management system designed to self-regulate organizational business activities with the primary goal of preventing the occurrence of losses when CSR is integrated into the organization's business model. It's not a news that for every choice that we make as an individual, there's always a consequence, be it positive or negative. In that case, the same applies to organizations. And in that regard, there are certain factors that actually drives CSR. Legal, it could be a kind of a legal framework that exists either at local level, state or provincial, federal, and even in some cases, international laws applies. This is one of the most important factors that actually drives CSR implementation or the need for it. Also, social factor, how your business activity impacts end users and local residents. So a good example that I will give in that kind of social context is if you are constructing a dam and you have in future, you should be able to put into consideration that there could be an overflow of the dam. What impact will that have on the local residents in the proximity of the dam? And do you have strategies in relocating the residents and things like that? Those are the things that you need to have in mind. So social factor also drives our CSR implementation. Economic factor, so bottom line, the essence of business, as we've been told, is to, it used to be maximization of profit, but in the new business world dispensation, it's now rather than maximization of profit, it's now optimization of profits. I wouldn't go into that difference this morning because that's not the presentation we're having today. The last one is moral, that which applies to the conscience. The head of any organization dictates what goes on in that organization. And in that regard, if that individual doesn't have the interest of the public at heart, it's hard for them to be interested in CSR. Also, I want us to go into the key risk areas that largely constitute significant loss exposures to organization. have it in mind that this presentation is focusing more on hazard risks because that's where a lot of losses are huge, as it directly affects our business operations. So the areas that I'll be talking about or making references to this morning is the health and safety aspect of business environment, social impact and engagement. For example, on social impact and engagement, in some cases, some companies have been known to be involved in bribery, corruption, and all that. So those also speaks to the social engagement that and social impact that the operation have on the public at large. This risk, being hazard risks, may pose additional risks such as financial operational risks, and strategic risks, being the model for enterprise risk management. Now let's look at what the best way I could put regulatory penalties is that regulatory penalties are consequential punitive measures emanating from non-compliance with specific regulatory requirements. The primary goal is for the government to achieve deterrence relating to specific offense. So having that in mind, regulatory penalties will be as a consequence of non-compliance to existing laws. Like I said earlier on, be it local, state or provincial, federal, or even international laws, depending on what it is and the mode of operation and the kind of business you are in. There are two major types of regulatory offenses. Absolute liability is one of them, and strict liability offenses. For absolute liability, no defense is raised. There's no need for defense. A good example of that is speeding ticket. If there's a speed limit and you go over the speed limit, then you get a ticket. So there's no need for defense. You just have to pay the ticket. For strict liability offenses, defense is required, and that's where your due diligence comes in. A good example of that is the violation of an Occupational Health and Safety Act. Establishment of prohibited acts, which means the government needs to establish that you are in non-compliance or in violation of a specific law. That's what we call actus reus in law. And in some cases, some offenses doesn't just border along these two areas of offenses. It could also have some form of criminal negligence. So a good example, in Alberta in Canada here, the fall restriction limit is 10 feet. So when you are walking at an elevation above 10 feet and above, you are supposed to have fall protection in place. So in a case where you have a fatality at work, where the individual involved, the victim, refused to use a fall protection, either as in form of fall restraint or fall arrest, then the company could be charged with criminal, or individual who have supervision over that the victim may be charged with criminal negligence. And in that case, there are further penalties other than these regulatory penalties that might be involved, and the losses becomes greater. Loss exposures, for the purpose of this webinar, I broadly categorized them into two major areas: direct losses as well as indirect losses. These losses emanate from legal proceedings, reputational and operational sources, etc. So what that implies is, let's look at a good example of direct losses. Financial loss. So when there's a litigation in place against an organization, at the end of it, if the organization is found guilty, then there will be some fines, or being asked to pay. So those monetary fines usually constitute a loss, direct loss to that organization. Operational loss. So for example, if you have a record or history of non-compliance, an agent or agency of the government could issue you with a stop work order. So in that case, productivity is altered, and that's also a direct loss to the company. Loss of key employees. Like I said earlier on, in some cases where criminal negligence is involved and one of your employee gets imprisoned, then it's a loss to that company. Or in some cases, if employee is not satisfied, they may resign because if they feel that the company is not in the interest of the employee. So that's also a loss of key employee to the organization. Loss of clients. We will look into scenario where that could apply. The example would be the BP scenario that we're about to talk shortly. So indirect losses, reputational. So in some cases, depending on the severity or of the outcome of the incident, you might find yourself in the front pages of news on the TV, on the news, which gives the company a bad reputation. It speaks more to a strategic risk loss. If we look at financial, we talked about cost of litigation earlier on and loss of revenue. In that case, those are monetary losses that will emanate as a result of the incident. So they are indirect in some way. And the market losses. So if a company has an kind of a competitive edge over other competitions, in this case, they may lose that market niche that they've carved for themselves, given also depends on the severity of the incident. So in this next slide, we are trying to compare CSR versus regulatory penalties. We should have in mind that CSR is a preventative approach towards loss. It's a way where organization would prevent losses in advance. For the lack of better words, I often refer to CSR as management system of management systems, or framework for managing management systems. So the benefits of CSR is that in nature it's generative or proactive. It increases bottom line. It increases organizational integrity. It increases employee morale. It lowers investment cost. Because a good example is if you were to hire maybe 2 or 3 individuals to look after the organizational CSR program or department, the cost of hiring those individuals will be way lesser compared to the punitive fines that you may pay as a result of a huge incident. So also CSR is a framework through which organizational risks can be managed. It shows that a corporation is mature in their culture. Regulatory penalties is more of reactive in a way because it's a consequence as a result of an action or an incident. It decreases bottom line depending on the fines. We have seen in different scenarios where fines can actually put a business out a business, given that if the fine exceeds what the organization can actually afford. It lowers employees' motivation. It results into higher investment cost, unmitigated risk. That's what it is, because the loss itself is actual, it's real. And it also shows that an organization is not mature in its corporate culture. That's why such incidents evolve into serious incidents. So now let's look at poor CSR scenario, the case of BP, British Petroleum. We know that history has it that British Petroleum has had a series of major incidents that had occurred over the years. That includes, but not limited to, the following. So we will be reviewing some of the incidents. In 2005, Texas City refinery, there was an explosion at that refinery. The outcome of that, there were 15 deaths, 180 workers were injured. Obviously, because of the fumes and liquids that were released into the environment, there was environmental pollution. The immediate loss in terms of dollar value was $50 million fine at the time, and subsequent fines relating to this incident resulted into over $100 million in direct losses. You will think that BP that's large enough to change the way BP operates and the culture within BP. But we find out that that wasn't the case, because in 2007, the same refinery released toxic substance into the environment. There were 143 workers that were exposed to the release. The release itself constitutes environmental pollution, and also over $100 million in financial losses. Again, in 2007, you would think that BP would sit down and review the incidents, major incidents that they've had, and overhaul or re-engineer its organization to prevent future losses. But that wasn't the case. Again, in 2010, Texas City Refinery chemical release, environmental pollution, there was 7.7 tons of benzene. Benzene, as we know it, is a known carcinogen. It causes cancer in humans. 7.7 tons of that was released into the environment. 17 tons of nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen oxide is one of greenhouse gases. As we know, 17 tons of that was released into the environment. Carbon monoxide, which is just a product of incomplete combustion, in this case of a fossil fuel, there was 186 tons of carbon monoxide that was released. And have it in mind that for each of these incidents, there were possibly over $100 million involved in punitive penalties and all that. But again, that didn't change the culture in which BP operates. So other incidents occurred that resulted in other financial losses in excess of $100 million over the years. However, the corporate culture of BP never changed until it reached a turning point. The whole world was aware, was a viewing audience to this incident on 20th of April 2010, when Deepwater Horizon incident occurred in the Gulf of Mexico in the US. The question I keep asking myself at the time was that, does BP have to wait for this to happen before they could see the potential of losses that might be involved in their business activities? But no, they never saw that, or maybe they saw it, they thought it's one of those losses that we can always afford. But then it became a turning point, because Deepwater Horizon incident was a single incident with significant multi-layer losses exposures. So you'll be wondering what I'm saying in regards to that. There was 11 individuals that died as a result of that incident. There was environmental pollution. There was 4.9 million barrels. That's the estimated barrel that was released into the aquatic environment, which constitute the largest oil spill in history, human history. There was a rig loss because the rig collapsed and settled at the bottom of the sea. We are all aware of this incident. So now let's look at other losses. Operational risk loss. There was a zero production attained because the drilling stopped. There was no oil that was recovered for sale. It was all released into the environment. There was financial losses. Over $50 billion. Over $50 billion was lost to BP. And this is enough. It's a significant loss financially to this organization. No matter how deep your pocket is, $50 billion. To put this in perspective, that's $50,000 million in 50,000 places. That is huge. And this is constituted by cost of cleanup of the spill, litigation cost, loss of revenue, and also the fines that were paid to various agencies in the US. Just to put this in perspective again, the wasted oil alone is over $600 million in revenue, so that could have been generated. But see the losses that they incurred in terms of overall losses, because that also include compensation for the inhabitants of the Gulf Coast. So strategic losses. That particular incident strained the relationship between BP and the US government. You can't put dollar value to that. Compromised reputation and public outrage. A lot of people were angry. It wasn't just in the US. It was regarded as a global incident. Virtually everyone that followed that incident knew that it was a serious one for BP. And at that point, that was when BP's culture changed. I believe there was, I'm not sure if it's still ongoing, but there was an onset of serious restructuring within BP. So now, we'll be wondering what is CSR implementation and the strategies behind that. CSR implementation requires the development of a sound CSR framework and management system in place. So you have to have a framework in place for CSR as a framework prior to implementation, because for you to implement, you have to have something in place. Usually in some cases it's called manual in some terms. Prior to the consideration for its implementation, in today's business world, effective implementation of CSR management system is key to the sustainability of any business organization. As long as you hire individuals to work for you, as long as you engage in business activities that involves the public being the end user, your business is at risk. And for your business to be sustainable, you need to have related and relevant management systems in place. And for you to be able to manage those management systems, a good example would be ISO 14001, which is environmental management system. It's just one of many management systems that an organization will require for its sustainability. However, the CSR framework will help to manage all of those management systems as a whole. CSR implementation strategies may include, but not limited to this. CSR must be overseen by the organization leadership. So what I'm saying is, whoever is the top dog, whoever is the most senior personnel in the organization, the example would be a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, will be the one to oversee your CSR. And usually I've seen organizations that attaches the Department of CSR to the office of the CEO. That's a very good way to make sure that this gets done. CSR must be integrated into the overall organizational objectives. So when the organization is defining its objectives, CSR should play a key role in order for them to foresee, to predict, and be able to put plans in place to prevent losses for the organization. A good example, $50 billion for BP to any organization around the world. That's huge. That's a lot of money. And a fraction of that can actually be invested in CSR. If they have a sound CSR in place prior to that incident, they probably could have spent probably even at the most, say $500 million. That is like less than 1% of what they have to pay in penalties. CSR management systems should be developed by highly competent professionals. Because it's a multidisciplinary framework or multidisciplinary approach to loss prevention, the individual or the organization that will be developing your CSR management system or framework, they should have professionals or a professional that is diverse in all the loss areas that you're looking at managing. So a good example for BP, they should have a CSR management system that speaks to health and safety that is being implemented, health and safety, environment, and as well as the social risk that would have prevented the major portion of the losses that they incurred as a result of the Deepwater Horizon incident. CSR implementation strategies may also include the following. CSR must have well-defined and clear deliverables. You need to know what your CSR needs to achieve. What are the goals? What are the things that you can that are tangible that needs to be achieved? And also there should be defined key performance indicators, because those are the things that you can measure. Those are the measurable factors. So also CSR KPIs, which is key performance indicators, must be measured, must be analyzed, must be reported, and must be monitored for you to be able to show the progress. And also because you have to set certain targets for you to be able to say that your targets are met or not, then you have to have your KPIs being monitored and analyzed and reported and all that. CSR must be periodically audited, even just at the least once a year. It should be audited, because that's where you're able to catch the loopholes, and you're able to identify where you are doing good as an organization and where you're lacking behind. And so you can identify those areas for improvement and be able to effectively put plans in place to address those improvement areas. Also, for CSR to be effectively implemented, there should be training in place provided to key employees of the organization. A management review, the MR of the CSR management system or framework, must be conducted periodically, also in this case at the least once a year. Organization can even tie that to the discussion around the audit that's been done, instead of setting aside a different time frame for MR to be performed. Also, to effectively implement CSR, if CSR is effectively implemented, there are a lot of benefits associated to that, and I'll just be mentioning some of them. CSR implementation offers business organizations the competitive edge, because now we know that we appeal to a different audience in terms of end users or customers. So when you have a good CSR in place, your clientele or the customer or the public would see you as a serious investor or serious business enterprise. And also that helps you to differentiate yourself as a brand from others. CSR is an enterprise risk prevention and reduction strategy. That's what it is. Other benefits that we can ascribe to CSR includes, but not limited to, it increases employee morale, because when you have a sound, for a good example, if you have a sound health and safety management system that has been implemented in your workplace, employees have that confidence that you are looking out for their best interest, and it boosts their morale. It increases your bottom line. It increases organizational integrity. It aids the maturation of your corporate culture. These are just some of the benefits that you and you cannot put dollar value to some of these things, but you can definitely tell based on your returns as your revenue increases over time. So it is an investment that I believe it's worth your while as an organization, and it also prevents you from incurring certain losses that you probably might not be able to put limits to. So in summary, To cap it all, this is the way I put it, as simple as ABC. Chance of loss. When your CSR increases, the effort, the investment you put into it, as it increases, the chances of you in getting involved or being penalized with regulatory penalties decreases. With this, I say thank you again for taking time to listen to this presentation. And I'll turn it back to the moderator to take over.
Thank you, Mr. Ayo, for this informative webinar. I would like to ask the audience to write your question now while I will start reading the first question. Which qualities would not qualify as CSR?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes. Which qualities would not qualify as CSR?
I'm not sure if I really understand that question. What does that mean, qualities that does not qualify as CSR?
Which qualities would not qualify as CSR? The qualities that not qualify as CSR. This is the question that some attendee wrote.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's an, I don't see that as a complete question. Maybe something was omitted. But like I said, CSR is more of a risk management framework to manage potential losses for the organization. So I mentioned earlier on things like health and safety, social factors or social engagement would include as areas of CSR. But quality-wise, even quality management is part of your CSR because it prevents losses because you don't want to produce, you don't want to market or sell products that will be returned for refund and things like that. And when if you have a sound quality management system in place, then that prevents the possibility of products being returned or lowers the chances of that happening. I'm not sure if that answers that question.
Thank you for your answer. We will go with the next question. How to measure the benefits of CSR?
The way to measure benefits of CSR, like I said in towards the last slide, when you identify, you have to define what your deliverables are because no two organizations are the same. Even if they are in the same business environment or in the same business, it's never the same. You have to define your CSR goals or objectives and targets based on your own operation. Once you define those deliverables that you want to achieve or that needs to be met, then you have to define key performance indicators. What are the things that would help you to determine that those deliverables were met? So a good example, if we say at our workplace we do not want to have lost time injuries. So now we will try, we have defined lost time injury as a key performance indicator. So we will start monitoring number of incidents resulting into lost time injury. So at the end of the year, as a yearly review towards the audit, then we can now say, oh, we had 3 lost time injuries. If we said 0, but now we have 3, that means that we haven't met that particular indicator. So that's how you monitor and you report and you review those KPIs because they define whether you achieve or not your CSR.
Thank you for this answer. Because of the time limitation, we will be answering the final question. What to remember when implementing CSR?
What do you need to remember? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Well, you need to understand the extent of your operation because this most management systems they are designed based on your operational processes. So you need to remember what is at stake here. You need to remember how much losses you're likely to encounter and how much you intend to invest. Because what I found with most organizations is that a lot of organizations do not have budget for preventing losses. And when they get hammered with huge penalties, they realize that, oh, if we had invested X dollar amount, maybe for example, maybe if we've invested $100,000, we wouldn't have encountered this $2 million loss. So you have to have those kind of consequences in mind. You also have to understand your operational processes, and you also have to understand that you have to have the management systems required for operation to be sustainable in place prior to defining your CSR. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Ayo, for this excellent webinar, and I want to thank all the attendees as well who have joined us today. I hope your questions have been answered. I also want to inform you that this webinar is recorded and can be found on PCB YouTube channel and in our website pcb.com. Additionally, PCB appreciates your comments and suggestions. Therefore, I would kindly ask you to write down your suggestion on the upcoming webinar topics in the question that will be shown at the very end of this session. Looking forward to seeing you all next week in a very interesting topic for all our Spanish speakers. Until then, have a great week.
Thank you.